Hi there, my name's Chris Winter, and in this video we're going to go through some of the best budget portrait lenses, so hopefully I can help you figure out which ones might be the best for you. And also, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely make sure to check out my brand new list that I just made, the best cameras for Instagram. I go through some of the cameras that would be best for you, so if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description box below this video and you can take a look. But anyway, let's get started and take a look at some of these lenses on these cameras here and see which ones might be right for you. So today's question says, hey Chris, I've currently got two lenses that I use on my Canon T7i. They're the 18-55 and the 55-250mm. They work okay for portraits, but I've heard that there are better options. Which would you recommend that are better for portraits? And I'm on a bit of a budget. Thanks. Well, you're right, they're actually really quite nice lenses, especially if you're starting out, but the problem is with those lenses generally is that they're going to have quite a slow aperture. So they're going to be shooting at around about f3.5 onwards. So you're going to be finding it quite hard to get that kind of nice portrait look with that shallow depth of field. So I've got a couple of different lenses right here which might work really quite well for you. I'll also talk about a couple of others as well. So for me, if you're just starting out in the world of portraits, the number one lens to get pretty much for anyone is this one right here. This is the 50mm f1.8. It's also commonly known as the Nifty 50 or the Plastic Fantastic because it's a 50mm lens that's really cheap and it's also relatively cheaply made. Now Canon make this, Nikon make this, and also a company called Yongnuo make this. I've actually got this one right here. And there's a few reasons why this is a great lens, other than the price, of course. This one comes in at about 50 bucks. The Canon one comes in at about $120. But firstly, you're gonna have a 50mm focal length. So on something like your Canon T7i, that's actually gonna be roughly an 85mm. But it's also got an f1.8 aperture, which means you can get that really nice shallow depth of field. So that's pretty much where your subject is in focus, really nice, pin sharp, but the background is nice and blurry. It's almost got a creamy bokeh look. That's what we would call it, bokeh. And this works really quite well for portraits. Now you will need quite a large space to take your portraits in, so this is probably going to work better for larger rooms or outdoor shots, but it is a really nice lens and definitely one for most people to have in their kit bag. Now if you want a slightly different focal length, you could take a look at this one right here. This is the 35mm f2. One of my favorite lenses as well because this one here works quite well indoors. Now, this is a f2 lens, so you're not going to be getting such a blurry background, and because also it's a wider focal length, you're not going to be getting as blurry a background either. But this does work really quite well for a lot of different shots. 35mm is very common. Generally, you're going to be shooting with either a 35mm, a 50, an 85, or a 100. Now the 35mm also works really well on full frame cameras, so you're going to be getting a very cool look. It's going to be quite wide, but also have that nice blurry background. And this one here is again from a company named Yongnuo. It's a little bit cheaper, quite a good lens, not super sharp, but definitely one to take a look at. Now for me, the best budget portrait lens you can get, other than the 50mm, is an 85mm. This to me is a dedicated portrait lens. As you can see, it's quite a lot bigger than these other lenses because you've got a really wide aperture and you've also got a longer focal length. Now the 85mm on a crop censored body is going to be really quite zoomed in, so you will need to be shooting this one outdoor generally. But on a full frame body, this is going to work really quite well. At 85mm, your depth of field is going to be very, very shallow, especially if you are shooting at f1.8, which means that you're going to be pretty much having your subject in focus and everything else is going to be almost unrecognizable. Very, very nice bokeh. And one thing you do need to make sure of is that you are getting your autofocus right. Even using manual focus sometimes with this might work as well because with the amazing shallow depth of field of this lens, even if your focus is slightly off, your eyelash could be in focus, but the eye itself might not be in focus. So that's one thing to look into. This is a really nice lens. Canon make a lens like this, Nikon make a lens like this, Yongnuo make a lens like this. 85mm to me is really the go-to if you want to be doing portraits. Now another lens I've enjoyed using is the 100mm f2 lens. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is quite good as well. Although I have found that that lens is a little bit restricting because again, on a crop censored body, you are talking about a very, very zoomed in lens right there, but it could be one that you look into. Now also don't be afraid to shoot with your 55-250mm on the longer focal length. You could probably shoot it around 135 to 150 and be able to get that kind of shallow depth of field, that kind of nice look. But pretty much with all portraits, if you are going to be having a nice portrait lens, I'd start with 50mm, then probably get the 85. And if you want something a little bit different, a little bit more creative, you want to get some shots for indoors, take a look at the 35mm. These are a couple of options. There you go, guys. That were just a couple of cheaper options for portrait lenses. Hopefully that was able to help you. And also, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely make sure to check out my brand new list that I just made, the best cameras for Instagram. I go through some of the cameras that would be best for you. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description box below this video and you can take a look. Hope you guys have a fantastic day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.